I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:30.
Recording in progress.
Now I would like to open the meeting at 6:30. Call to order. Mr. Gopal, would you please give us the opening prayer and pledge of allegiance?
Come on up.
Ooh, bow tie day.
Court day. Untied bow tie.
Well, but that's after court.
All right. Thank you. Lord, we meet here tonight to conduct matters of business. We ask that you guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon these activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. We thank you for being the source of our guidance tonight. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do a roll call. Mr. Broker.
Yes. Lorraine is absent. Kruger.
Here.
Tucker. Present. Opal. Here. Patrick.
Here.
Kessler.
Here.
Reed is absent with 5 members present.
Okay, in the absence of Supervisor Lorraine, we need to appoint a temporary chair.
Motion approved.
Support.
All, roll call, Tom.
Lorraine is absent. Reed is absent. Patrick.
Yes.
Krug.
Yes.
Kessler.
Yes.
Opal.
Yes.
Tucker.
Yes.
Carries.
You want to do the, yeah, why don't you do the recording announcement, Tom?
Okay. To members of the public attending tonight's meeting in person or via Zoom, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded to be shown on Public Access TV Spectrum Channel 191. Recorded meetings are also posted on the Fenton Area Community Television YouTube channel. For those attending via Zoom, we ask that you keep your microphone muted until we reach portions of the meeting where public comment is allowed. For tonight's meeting, there are no public hearings, therefore all public comment will be taken near the end of the meeting. Meeting materials are available for download on the Township's website at www.fentontownship.org.
Thank you. Are there any requests to amend tonight's agenda? Okay, a motion is in order to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll move the motion.
Second.
Roll call, Tom.
Krug.
Yes.
Patrick.
Yes.
Kessler.
Yes.
Reed is absent. Gopal.
Yes.
Tucker.
Yes.
Lorraine is absent. Motion carries.
Thank you. Presentations are first tonight, and we have Platt Moran going to give us our audit.
Thank you.
It's Pam Hill and Amy Titer. I probably murdered your last name.
You said it perfect, actually. Great job.
Well, thank you for having us here this evening. We're here to discuss the results of the audit for the 12/31/2021 fiscal year end. And so we do have a couple things that should have been included in your packet. You would have your financial statements, which is the thicker, about 50 pages document. We've taken a lot of that information and put it into a graph formation and looking at some trends for you just to kind of talk high level about the numbers that are presented in the statements. So we'll go through those. And then there's also an end of audit letter addressed to the Township Board, which we will also just briefly touch on as well.
Yeah. For the board members, those documents are on separate
Yeah.
tabs on your Adobe.
Thank you. And then I did just want to briefly touch just a little bit on the audit result and process this year. So we started the audit in about mid-April, and we actually completed it and issued by about mid-May. So it was really a very efficient process this year. We spent about 300 hours auditing the books and records of the township. And we work very closely with Tom, Debbie, Lisa, the entire team, and obviously Bob, Vince, and John as well. We really appreciate all your input throughout the process as we work through the audit. So that's kind of just a high level of how it went. It went very well. It was great to be back in person full time, and I think there was a lot of efficiencies found on both ends by doing that. With that, we did issue an unmodified opinion within your financial statements again this year. So basically, a clean opinion means you can rely on the numbers as they are presented. Speaking of the numbers, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and let her kind of walk high level through some of the general fund results for the year.
Thank you, Pam. All right, so we have the first slide already up here, and what this is showing you is a 5-year trend for general fund revenue. You can see below the bar graph that revenue is broken out into 8 categories, which is detailed out with the numbers below. As you can see, revenue has been trending up over the past 5 years, increasing approximately $468,000 from the prior year. Some of the bigger contributors to the increase from last year is number 1, property taxes. So that's the gray bar there at the top, you'll see. So this increased by approximately $57,000 from last year. Number 2 would be state shared revenue. So that's the kind of navy blue bar in the middle there, the large piece. This increased by about $231,000 from the prior year. So within this $231,000 is a $146,000 census adjustment. So that is great for the township. And then lastly, the other revenue piece of the bar, that teal at the bottom, that increased by about $392,000, which is largely attributed to township land that was sold during the year. Moving to the next slide. Again, you'll see a similar chart here, a 5-year trend, but this time it's broken down for the general fund expenditures. Again, at the bottom, you'll see detailed with numbers and 7 categories broken out below. But really, the story that this graph is painting for you all is a story of consistency. And really, it's a testament to the township's effective budgeting and proper planning. As you can see, that expenditures have hovered around 2.7 to 2.8 million over these past 5 years. So that leads us nicely into the next slide, a 5-year trend of fund balance. So the revenue growth that we discussed and the relatively flat expenditures have a combined effect of building a really healthy general fund balance. So as of the 2021 year end, the township had an overall fund balance of about 4.5 million, which is an increase of about 1.1 million from last year. So the light blue bar there that you see shows you that 3.6 million of this total is unassigned and assigned fund balance. And then that smaller bar shows that 796,000 of fund balance is restricted, and that's for public access programming. You can see that that light blue bar has been increasing over the past 5 years, and this is actually the first year that the assigned fund balance has surpassed annual expenditures. So you can see, and the teal bar is annual expenditures on this graph here. And this, in theory, means that general fund could operate for more than a year without collecting revenues. So obviously this puts the township in a great overall position to focus on future needs or projects. Moving,
Go ahead. If I could just make a comment. So yeah, I think that I would just like to echo what Amy said. I mean, I think that last graph really tells a good story. The fund balance has been increasing steadily, and it's really a testament, again, to the budgeting. So if you look at your expenditure trends, they're really pretty darn flat. And so I think that's a testament to monitoring the budget, the board, making those decisions and making sure you stick to the budget. So that's how you've been able to get there, along with some increases in your taxable value, the growth that you've had in the township. And like Amy said, that really positions you well for a community that is continuing to grow. You want to make sure you have you have a nice, healthy fund balance so that you can continue to do the projects and infrastructure that's needed to continue to support the township as it grows. And another success story, I'll let Amy touch on this too.
we'll end on the bar graph presentation on another success story of the township's OPEB plan. So what you're seeing here is, again, surprise, another 5-year trend. The green bar in this situation, or teal, represents the total OPEB liability of the township, whereas that orangish bar represents the planned net position for OPEB. You can see in 2017, the plan was about 48.8% funded, so that green liability bar is a lot taller than the planned net position bar. But fast forward now to 2021, there's been some fluctuation, but this can be expected. But the plan is now 93.4% funded, so those bars are pretty darn close to equal. Again, to echo what Pam has already said, the narrative continues of commending the township and all their efforts with budgeting, and really this puts the township in a position where the focus doesn't have to be on these long-term legacy costs, but on the true needs of the township. Again, which is great because we're seeing the township is quite a growing community. I'll pass it back to Pam.
Thank you.
Any question on the numbers? Okay, and we're just going to very briefly go through the end of audit letter. So if you recall at the beginning of the audit, we send a letter out to the board, and we also talk with the 3 full-time elected officials, talk through what our plan for the audit process is going to be. This letter is really just a follow-up to that plan. How did our plan go? Did we have any deviations from our plan, and so on? So the majority of this letter is all good news, saying there were no deviations from our plan. I think the other thing that is probably important to note is actually what's not in this letter. As we go through the audit process, we test the township's internal controls, segregation of duties. If we noted any items of concern, we would be including them in this letter. We're happy to say that we did not have any, and so that's why you don't see that in the letter. I do want to say that for a community with a staff your size, that's not an easy feat. So everyone shares a part of those internal controls to make sure there is proper segregation of duties, and I know that's a very big focus of management. So you should feel good as the township board, knowing that the segregation of duties are intact, but also knowing that when we come out and do the audit, we're not making a whole bunch of journal entries or adjustments to your books, and you can rely on the numbers as your team are presenting them to you on a monthly basis. So that's probably the main thing I wanted to focus on. There's, of course, a whole bunch of information in the back just on some legislative items, things that are happening at the state level. Also, some more information on changes related to the spending of federal dollars as you get ready to start spending those federal ARPA dollars. Just some further information and resources for the township. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I ask this every audit, but is there a point where we have too much money, basically assets versus liabilities? Is there a point where we don't want to be, we don't want to take away the people's money if we don't have to?
Yeah, so great question. I'll probably give you the same answer maybe I gave you last year, but we'll see. So I do think that there is definitely a minimum. So there's a minimum that you don't want to go below because you need to be able to pay your bills from cash flow standpoint, things like that. So there's definitely a minimum for a community your size with your budget in the general fund. You probably don't want to be below 30-40% at a minimum. When we have growing communities that we work with, we tend to see fund balance on a little bit of a higher side, that 120-some% that Amy talked about, because you are growing, and we know that infrastructure costs are not cheap, right? So I think Tom probably has a list about 10 pages long that if you were to ask him how that money could be spent, it probably could be spent in 6 months or whatever. So I do think what I always tell my clients is to be intentional about your fund balance. So it's only too much if you keep collecting it but have no purpose for it. So as you're going through the budget process, talking about the intentions, what are your long-term plans? What do you plan to use those for? I think that is the key to making sure that your fund balance is at the right level.
That being said, I don't want us to be in the situation where we have enough money that we're looking for things to spend it on. Just because we have it doesn't mean I think we necessarily have to, oh, we got this, let's have a spree. I just wonder the 124%, is 200% too high?
Again, I mean, I think that a lot of it depends on the intention of what you're spending that on. So I don't know, from a 5-year budgeting perspective, what your future plans are from an infrastructure. So that would probably be more of a Tom question from a long-term perspective.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
Yep.
With us bringing the water to Thompson Road, then phase 2, would you expect that number to grow as Thompson Road grows with
So it could.
whatever happens there?
Yeah, so it could. I mean, obviously, the water piece that's going to get paid out of the new water fund that you set up. Obviously, if values grow and you add more to your tax base, then you'll have more in property tax revenue. If that also brings in more residents, then you could see additional state shared revenue. But again, you wouldn't see that for another 10 years. So you just had the census adjustment in 2020. Actually, just now pretty much getting the money for that. But you did see a nice jump in 2020 compared to some communities. So, that's still pretty far out. The growth is a nice opportunity for property taxes to increase, but I think about 60% of your revenue is actually state share revenue. So it all depends on sales tax collections and how much people are spending in the economy. And who knows what that's going to look like, frankly, with inflation the way it is and everything that we're seeing in the stock market and the gas prices and everything. Who knows what sales tax revenue is going to look like. We had the last 2 years were really good. But, I think it's anyone's guess in terms of what will that really look like. And that's your number one revenue source. It's not property taxes. It's your state shared revenue.
Because we have several new good developments going in the township, so it should impact us both in population. It'll have an impact somewhat on the schools. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure.
So as far as like, I guess a typical, maybe like recession, like, like maybe 2009 or something, how much did that impact like the state revenues as sort of a percentage?
Yeah, so the biggest impact in the recession in '09 was the drastic drop in the taxable values, which, again, still is a significant, your number 2 revenue source. And unfortunately, because of the way Headley and Proposal A worked together, your taxable values were allowed to drop dramatically, but they still had to very slowly and incrementally go back up because of the limitations. So that did have a big impact. And when we had communities that were kind of teetering on that minimum fund balance, when that recession hit, they were in trouble. They were really looking like grasping at how can we get more revenue? What are we going to do? We've cut half our workforce. You have to provide essential services, right? So there's only so much you can do. So that was really a struggle. And frankly, state share revenue was impacted as well, because there's 2 pieces to state shared revenue. There's your constitutional, which you're constitutionally required to get unless there's a statewide vote and the Constitution changes. But then there was this other piece, and the state has kind of slowly been eating away at that statutory piece since 2001, I think. So, yep.
Anything else from, sir? Any questions? Okay.
All right.
What did you do to Michael?
I know. You should ask him. No, we wish him well. He accepted an offer at his church, and he's doing really well.
I see they just had a baby too.
He just announced he was having a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We miss him too.
I know, we do. We miss him a lot.
Yeah.
I was thinking about him as I was walking down the stairs today, like, oh, it's so weird. He's not here. We'll tell him you said hi.
Please do. Okay, thank you much, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Meeting minutes included in the packet are the minutes from June 7th, the regular meeting. Are there any corrections, requested revisions? to the minutes. Take care.
Thank you.
If not, the meeting stand approved as presented. Expenditures. Are there any questions regarding any of the invoices? I need a motion is in order to approve the expenditures of $215,658.35.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, Tom?
Reed is absent. Gopel?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Kessler?
Yes.
Lorraine is absent. Crew?
Yes,
Patrick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
thank you. There are no public hearings tonight. Are there any reports from any of the committees this evening? There are no communications. The first is adoption of ordinances. This is the second reading of the proposed zoning ordinance amendment to revise PUD conditions for Miller Industries property on Township Road, which was introduced on June 7th meeting. John, is there any comments or questions from you, sir?
I don't think beyond what we talked about the last time when we did the first reading. I think, as you know, a couple of us did a tour in here to see and understand what they were doing inside, and particularly how that pertains to the parking requirements that are under the ordinance. They're doing a lot of robotics things that, don't require cars to get there. They spend the night there. So it goes to the criteria that we have in here that kind of let the planning commission, if you will, play around with the amount of parking relative to what the applicant's need is. Because the applicant has told you that the object of the game is to jam as much building onto this site as possible because of their requirements for new work coming. So to the extent there are issues with parking, it's gonna be something that only really affects the applicant. So I'm comfortable with leaving some discretion in that regard. There's some other issues that we'll talk about when we being planning commission, we'll talk about when we get the final site plan. But given that the building is there and the use is there, I think it's appropriate to allow them to expand that to make the best use of that parcel that they can. Because I don't think it's going to get used for anything else.
Okay.
Yeah, I also could mention, we did hear from one of the neighbors who seemed very happy with the
Yeah,
expansion, which is always good to see.
There was some concern brought to me about how we're interpreting the PUD. Do you have any qualms about that, John?
No, I'm not sure if you had the same concern that I had brought to me, but it's been open for discussion. And it's probably worth looking at, because 100 years ago, when I went to the training for all this stuff, they told you what the theories were behind the PUDs. And I will tell you that the basic theory is one of combined uses allows you to do that. And we've kind of strayed from that in the sense that a lot of the developments that are coming in for PUDs are just single use kinds of things. Now, there's nothing that requires that, so I'm not sure that what we're doing isn't okay.
Okay.
But I think we're going to start taking a look at that, to just look at the philosophy behind what we're doing and seeing if that's right.
At the planning commission.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it'll be, if we do change it, it'll be ordinance impacting.
Okay.
'Cause I don't think there's anything that prohibits this in the ordinance, but the general concept that allowed for the creation was generally for blending uses. There's nothing that says that it has to be exclusive that way, or that you have to have at least 2 zoning districts to be a PUD. We created our own PUD ordinance that kind of overlays the zoning ordinance itself. So it's worth looking at. It was done, I think, shortly before I came on board to the planning commission, which would have been around the year 2000. So I'm not up with what the concepts were.
Yeah.
Over the years, I've heard different discussions Charlie Mueller has said to me he thinks that we just need to throw them away.
Charlie
That's,
does
you know,
believe
Charlie's
that.
opinion on it, and, you know, and a lot of what he was saying was, you know, it was intended to be mixed use, and now it's not. On the plus side, though, when they come in as PUDs, it does allow the planning commission and the board to put conditions on them.
And that's what I've always
that you
thought
might-
PUDs
might,
were for.
you know, not otherwise be able to do. There is conditional zoning available now that didn't used to be, but it's not nearly as effective as the concept behind it because
Yeah.
of the limitations they put on it. In that scenario, the applicant has to come to you with conditions. You're not supposed to tell them this is what the condition needs to be, so you dance this little dance.
Yeah.
You know, that goes around. It's just kind of silly when it gets right down to it. So, you know, the concept is out there, so the PUD is actually a better mechanism for dealing with scenarios where you want restrictions on a site, because you can just flat out talk about it. I think we need a restriction for X, Y, Z before I would approve this. You know, it's a little easier to manage. So we will be talking about it. I don't think there's anything with respect to this current request that violates anything in the ordinance.
Okay.
But I think I think it does bear looking at to see if we're heading in the direction we want to head.
Okay. Anybody else have a concern? Okay, if not, I need a motion to adopt an amendment to zoning ordinance number 594 to revise the PUD conditions for parcel 0603-200-038 as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, Tom.
Patrick,
Yes.
Kessler,
Yes.
Krug,
Yes.
Gopel,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Rain and Reed are absent, motion carries, ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. The next is the second reading, rezoning of R2203, the Fairways of Spring Meadows, parcel 06-17-100-008. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns?
One thing I would say about this one is had they brought us this plan in the beginning, it probably would have been approved because it does fit, the amended version fits within the confines of the ordinance as it exists. So we would probably have been recommending approval had this been the first rather than the second.
Second reading, okay. Anybody else? If not, I need a motion to adopt an amendment to ordinance number 594 to revise the PUD conditions for parcel 06-17-100-008 as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, Tom.
Gopel,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Lorraine is absent, Patrick,
Yes.
Krug,
Yes,
Reed is absent, Kessler.
Yes.
Motion carries, ordinance is adopted.
thank you. The next is proposed municipal civil infraction ordinance, second reading. If you remember, this is second reading of the proposed municipal civil infraction order, which was introduced at the June 7th meeting. Mr. Belzer, please, any further comments,
No,
questions?
this is an ordinance that permits me an option to, reduce a charge or change a charge to a municipal civil infraction, which generates more money back to the township and to the, instead of it going to the state where they spend it on the teacher's pension or judge's pension or whatever, library fund. And it's not for the police department to utilize this as an initial charge, but rather to be reduced down to this.
So there is no new ordinances or laws we're putting on the books here. It's just the existing laws we have, giving you kind of a more
Right, it's making
ability
some
to-
of these things a
okay.
civil infraction that doesn't go on their driving record. And that's done a lot of times, but whatever the fine is, we get very little of it. This way, more of the money comes back to the township.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, need a motion to adopt the municipal civil infraction ordinance as presented.
I'll move the motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Kessler,
Yes.
Krug,
Yes.
Reed and Lorraine are absent. Patrick?
No.
Tucker?
Yes.
Copel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is there are no unfinished business. New business is resolution number 2022-17 mosquito abatement special assessment public hearing. Tom?
Okay, we've had discussion about this before, try to refresh your memory. The law was changed in 2020 that allows a formal special assessment district for mosquito abatement services. So we had delayed putting something on the ballot until we could go through this process. So we're now ready to start the process. What we have is a resolution to schedule a public hearing for the July 19th meeting, at which time the board will be presented with a resolution to formally initiate the special assessment and approve ballot language to go on the November ballot for the voters to approve. So it just follows the newly minted statute for this process. Consulted with Mundy Township a little bit, they went through it last year. And we're expecting the numbers to be pretty much what we are looking at for the last decade, around $30, up to $30 a year per parcel. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from anyone? Nope, there's nobody out there. We'll move to, Tom, could you read the resolution, please?
Sure. So the resolution 2022-17, it tentatively declares the township's intent to create a township-wide mosquito abatement special assessment district, tentatively designates the cost to be assessed against all properties in the special assessment district, which tentatively include all parcels of land in the township. Schedules a public hearing on the proposed special assessment district for Tuesday, July 19th, 2022. Directs the clerk to mail and publish the notice of public hearing as required by statute, and repeals any conflicting resolutions.
Thank you. Roll call, Tom.
We need a motion.
I'll move the resolution. Need a second.
Support.
Now, roll call, Tom.
Tucker?
Yes.
Lorraine is absent. Gopel?
Yes.
Kessler?
Yes.
Reed is absent. Patrick?
Yes.
Krug?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next is the proposed revised building inspection service agreement. Any questions or concerns? Tom?
Let me get the memo up here. The memo kind of explains what we're looking at here. So in December of 2020, the board approved a 2-year agreement with STSA Construction, which is Stuart Worthing, to continue providing building inspection and plan review services for 21 and 2022. That agreement maintained the previous rate of $40 per inspection, $15 per hour that had already been in place. That per inspection rate has been in effect since 2016, and the hourly rate has not changed since 2009. Stuart approached Vince and myself recently and asked for consideration for a $10 increase per inspection, mainly due to the fuel costs that are going on right now. It's pretty significant. We did a quick survey, phone survey among all the other Genesee County communities, and a number of them do use contracted inspectors, and in some cases like us, that's all they use. Other times they have inspectors that they use to handle overflow volume, but in every case, the per inspection rate is consistently $50 across the board. So based on that, both Vince and I were in agreement to recommend that the board approve an amended agreement, which is included in the packet, which increases that per inspection rate to 50 for the 6 months remaining on the current agreement. We can readdress the whole agreement at the end of the year.
Any comments, questions,
Do we need
concerns?
to adjust the fees that we collect to be able to cover that, or is it, what kind of budgetary effect is it gonna have?
Not enough to warrant anything. We're with the amount of volume we're doing, we're generating more than enough to cover this.
Any other
I
comments?
guess I was just a little
Yeah.
curious, did they give us a unusually good rate in 2020, or have the other communities increased their rates too?
I don't know what the history for the other communities are. Ours went from 35 to 40 in 2016.
Okay.
And it was 35 from 2009 to 2016.
All right.
And so I don't know, but when this was brought up, when we checked, everybody across the board was at 50.
Anything else? If not, I need a motion to approve the revised building inspection service agreement with STSA Construction LLC as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, Tom?
Lorraine is absent. Cotrick?
Yes.
Kessler?
Yes.
Gopel?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Krug?
Yes.
Reed is absent. Motion carries.
Good. Are there any board comments tonight from any of the members? We're to that point. Okay. Is that, who's at the bottom here, Tom?
We'll be stopping the Zoom
Okay.
once we get to
Don
public.
McKeon is the name.
Well, I was gonna, we're at,
Don McKeon is the name.
Okay.
are there, there's no one in the audience, anyone on Zoom that would like to address the board?
And Don, you're on mute, so if you're trying to say something, you gotta take it off mute. If you don't take it off mute, we will assume you don't wanna say anything.
Okay, I assume there are none. What we need now to do is I need a motion to recess the open meeting for the purpose of convening a closed session to review negotiations regarding the proposed amendment to the Fenton Township Employees Union Collective Bargaining Agreement.
So moved.
Support.
Roll call, Tom?
Kessler?
Yes.
Gopel?
Yes.
Krug?
Yes.
Reed is absent. Lorraine is absent. Cotrick?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, the open meeting is recessed.
Yep.
We're gonna shut down the Zoom now. For those who are on, we will not restart the Zoom. We will, once the meeting is reconvened, there will be one potential action item and then the meeting will